I think it was just this past Monday, right, that the eclipse, right? I'm not 2 weeks past that, right? I'm right on line here. So you saw the eclipse, is that right? Did everybody see it? Were you in the line of totality is really where you need to be. And if you are not in the line of totality, then you really don't understand what the glory of God. But just singing that song right there, thinking about the stars and everything like that, it was so beautiful. I mean, your eyes have never seen, unless you've seen another eclipse, a total eclipse, your eyes have never seen or witnessed, and I sure hope clouds were not over your viewing area at the time, but you have not witnessed that vibrant color before, that luminescent white and purple that was there. It was just so, so beautiful. I'm speechless, and really I just wanted to bow down and cry right there. Proverbs chapter 25, you take your Bible and you turn to Proverbs chapter 25. I try to, and this is not on my notes here by any means, but I try to give you a well-rounded diet for you to take in. Try not to focus on one thing more than another. And this has come up about 3 times this past week, so maybe I'm supposed to share it to you, and I'll just drop it off and you pick it up if you need to. But when I bring something to you, now we may stay in Proverbs for a while. We may talk about the tongue for a while. We may talk about your actions out of church for a number of lessons, but at some point we'll move on past that. We'll transition into another area. But I have been exposed to some teaching that the presenter, all they ever did was, it was the same driving point again and again and again. And have you ever heard the term, they're a mile wide and an inch deep? We need to plow in the Bible a lot deeper than an inch. That's our problem with us, with you. You are a mile wide and an inch deep, but there's also a problem when you are an inch wide and a mile deep. Okay, you see? If somebody has drilled down on one thing so far, and that's all that they ever talk about, you really see this a lot of times on maybe like in our day and time, Christian people that say Christian bloggers or things like that. Or you know, if one person is always on that one line right there, that begins to become a turnoff, to me at least. Now, maybe not you. Maybe I'm the only person that feels that way. But when a person has an inch wide and a mile deep, they have put something on me that I begin to kind of shun from. So you might come across something like that. You need variety. That's why I was telling you, those two, you need variety in that. You yourself need to plow. You need to plow. If your whole foundation for all the truth that you have comes from an online source or a source that is really apart from God. Now a lot of people clothe, they're what? A wolf in sheep's clothing, right? A lot of people clothe, oh, this is from God. This is what the Bible says right here. But you're not going to know what the Bible says, for one, if you don't bring the Bible with you to the lesson time, to the school time. You need to bring your textbook with you. You need to be sure that I'm telling you what God is really saying. You need to be sure on the other stuff that you read too. Maybe a newsletter article, maybe an article in a newspaper. Like I said, online stuff. Every now and then, some of that stuff, and you need to be aware, is that person just a mile deep and an inch wide? You know, then I need to balance. You need balance. You need a good, healthy balance in your diet. Okay? So just beware. Too shallow would be a prosperity thing, and too deep would be somebody that has just drilled home one avenue. Maybe it's grace, and they've thrown everything else out, and it's all about grace, which it is grace. Now, don't get me wrong, but you can have an overdose in areas as well. So that's just bonus right there. If I offended you, I intended to, and I did a good job. But no, it really wasn't. But amen. Amen. It was. I just threw that in there to lighten the mood back up. Okay, Proverbs. Did I tell you Proverbs chapter 25? That's where we are. Our greatest enemy, we often think, who's our greatest enemy? We might think somebody like North Korea is a great enemy. We might think somebody like Russia is a great enemy, or back in World War II, and the Nazis would have been a great enemy. Mussolini, Stalin, they were great enemies. Patton was right when he identified those guys as being enemies to society and us. But we often think of great enemies as being something external, on the outside. But our greatest enemy is not an external force. Our greatest enemy is not something on the outside like the boogeyman or the monster under your bed or the thing in your closet there coming out and getting you. That's not our greatest enemy. Our greatest enemy is internal. Our greatest enemy could be a lack of self-control in our life. Nobody likes that. So you didn't amen that. Nobody likes that or wants to talk about it, but Solomon does. And Solomon has knowledge of the inner demon, the inner battle that goes on. So Solomon, he comes and he says wisdom in a person's life will speak or be evident. Wisdom in a person's life will be evident by the self-control that they have in their life. So self-control is really God having control of your life. So think about that. Self-control is really God's control of your life. We can see this. We can see this through through history. Many historical men came through the pages of history, like Napoleon. Napoleon came through. He conquered France a couple of times. He conquered other things. But Napoleon himself had trouble in his own life conquering certain issues of his own life. There were other leaders who come through, and they would try to conquer really the world, or at least large portions of the world, but they themselves had trouble conquering something on the inside as well. Political leaders. We have seen just in your lifetime, you've seen, a handful or many political leaders go through or make some kind of fall from their prominence. But political leaders have done great things. They have conquered or led the nation in a good way, but then they've had a struggle on the inside as well. You can think of John F. Kennedy, you can think of Nixon, you can think of Clinton, you can think of General Petraeus, and like I said, there's a list of others that goes on and on. They were good men, they conquered, they did a great many things, but they also, there was something in them that they could not conquer. Solomon's a great conqueror. We know that David enlarged the border of Israel, but Solomon enlarged that border even further than his father David did, but yet there was a certain area in his life that he could not conquer. And the Bible tells us that he began to let these other foreign ladies come into his domain, and they turned his heart. They turned his heart away from God. So we know that about Solomon, that he had some struggles like this in his life. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. Like a city that is broken into and without walls is a man who has no control over his spirit. Now, if we were going to substitute, because we read the word spirit, and we're thinking of, hey, it's coming up on October, Halloween or something like that. We're thinking of ghosts and goblins or maybe Ghostbusters type spirits. We don't grasp that. But if we were to insert some words like, is a man like a city that is broken into and without walls, is a man who has no control over his appetite. Is a man like a city that's been broken into, is a man who has no control over his passions. A man who has no control over his longings. A person who cannot control their spirit is like a city with no walls. A person who cannot control his spirit, who cannot control his longings, who cannot control his passion, is like a city without any walls. It means the walls have come down. Now, why was this significant in Solomon's time, or this early, this Old Testament time? Why would this have been significant? Because walls around a city meant a few things. And if there were no walls, then there would be an absence of certain things. What walls meant was there was law. If there were walls around a city, that meant there was law in that city. That city was governed, controlled by certain law. If a city had walls, that meant that there was probably, as safe as could be, there was some commerce in that city. There was some business. There was some transactions that went on. If a city had walls around it, what else would that mean? It would mean there's protection. There would be protection in that area. There would be security in that area. What happened when Nehemiah heard that the walls of his town, his city, had been burned? Nehemiah fell down, wept, he grieved for it, and he fasted for days, all because law was gone, commerce was gone, security was gone, protection was gone. That's what that would have meant to these people in Old Testament days. So to take the walls down meant that there was an absence of law. And if there's an absence of law, that means there's the freedom for something to come in and steal and pillage and infiltrate. So like a city that is broken into and without walls is a man who has no control. When there is no control over our life, when we are unable to say no to anything and we have relinquished control of our life to just emotions or a roller coaster ride, then we have taken the walls down. And what happens when the walls are down? Well, we allow most anything else to come in and shape us. You want people coming in and shaping your grandchildren? You want people coming in and shaping your children? When you don't like mice in your house, do you? No. How much of a sliver of an opening does a mouse need? Just enough to stick his little pointed nose through, right? There's a crack in the wall. There's enough for the enemy to enter in anything. When the wall is breached, we will allow anything to come in on the inside. So Solomon says, when a man can't control his own desire, there's a breach in that wall, and anything will come in and steal and manipulate and try to take over areas of your life. See, self-control is one of the greatest struggles of this generation. Why? Because we do not say no to anything. We do not say no to ourselves. We do not say no to our children. We do not say no to most anything that we come up against. Look what happens. Look what happens in Proverbs chapter 23 when we cannot say no. Proverbs chapter 23, verse 19. 19 through 20. Listen, my son, and be wise, and direct your heart in the way. Do not be with heavy drinkers of wine or of gluttonous eaters of meat. Now, we need to put the brakes on right there, because if I say you're not supposed to drink socially, if I say you're not supposed to eat or not supposed to overeat, you're going to say, well, that doesn't pertain to me, so I can turn my ears off right now and I can think about something else. So let's just remove these two. Let's just think about some other area. You can insert, let's just call them one area right there. Okay, so verse 19 and 20. Listen, my son, and be wise, and direct your heart in the way. Do not be with those who are excessive in certain areas. We're going to look at these excessive areas. We're going to identify some other areas besides what's listed here, because we don't just want to pigeonhole this into some kind of thing here. And you say, well, it doesn't apply to me because I don't overeat and I don't drink. But do not be with those who are in excess in one area. Do not be with those who are excess in certain things. Verse 21. For the one who is in excess will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe one with rags. So there's some other areas. One other area that we've already talked about over the last few weeks, and Solomon says this area, there can be a person who has an excess in a certain area, and that certain area can kill, it can lame, it can hurt, it can be harmful. And Solomon says when a person has an excessive use of the tongue, that's bad. So that can happen. So see, we've just identified one other area that you thought this didn't pertain to you because you don't partake in these two items. So what else is there? Our tongue, you know, a lot of times we hide behind a screen today. Talked about this like 1,000 times, but a lot of times we hide behind a screen or something, and our fingers are what we use instead of a tongue. Our fingers can hurt, kill, maim as well. So is there an area that is out of control in your life? Is there an area that is in excess of in some capacity of your life? What about overcommitment in life? We can have overcommitment. We can have an excess. We can have overcommitted ourselves on many things. We can overcommit ourselves at school. We can overcommit ourselves at work. We can overcommit ourselves with social functions or community activities, community groups. We can overcommit ourselves in church. And when we overcommit ourselves in these areas, we've done an excess, we've overcommitted, and we never follow through with anything. Those things can be out of control. So why in the world would somebody overcommit or not be able to say no to something in their life? It's because you want people to like you. So you'll overcommit. Why do you overcommit to something? Because you want to be seen as a person who hits the home run. You want to be seen as a person who comes through in the clutch. You want to be seen as the person they look to when the chips are down. So you've overcommitted. You've gone in excess. What else? We overcommit in our lifestyle as well, don't we? We overcommit in our lifestyle because what? We want to play keeping up with the Joneses. We want to keep up with the neighbor. We want to look as good as the neighbor does. We want our house or our toys or our habits to match them. And what happens when we overcommit, when we do an excess of our lifestyle, we end up in debt. And we end up in debt up to our eyes. And it's unmanageable, our debt becomes. So let's go back. Let's go back to Proverbs 25. Where were we? 28. We're going to continue to look at this. Keep your finger there and also turn to Proverbs 18, verse 10. So you flip to those two, Proverbs 25 and Proverbs 18. We're going to continue to look at this illustration of the wall. So Proverbs 25, like a city that is broken into and without walls, is a man who has no control over his spirit. A city that lets things in, a temple that lets things in, meaning you have lost control of your spirit, and you are not saying no to anything. You're just letting all of these outside forces come in. God knows your strength. God knows your weakness too. He'll provide a way. This word tells us that as well. So Proverbs 18 now. Proverbs 18, verse 10 through 11. Thinking about the wall here. 10 through 11. A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. Before structure, I started at 11. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs into it and is safe. A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. Now, how do we deal with these areas, this inability? How do we, this going out of control? How do we deal and manage our life so that we don't go out of control? How do we work our way, navigate our way through that? What we need to do is we need to exercise self-control by giving God control of our life. But we think the opposite is true in our life. We do not work on, our idea of self-control is not giving God more control or turning to God. Our idea of self-control is I must conquer this on my own. That's the way our mentality thinks. I have to have control of this. I have to be conqueror of this situation in my life. So the question for you as we talk about this is, when you are out of control, when you have lost control of your life, what is the thing that you turn to? What is it that you trust in? And if it's not God, then that's an idol to you. That thing has become more than God to you. If you are out of control in your life, what are you going to turn to? Because you can probably think of it right now. If you get off the rail in your life today, what are you going to turn to? If the wheels fall off of your life and you get a bad report, what's going to be the first thing you go to? Think about that. Have you placed that in a higher position than God? If so, then it's an idol in your life. I mean, we could be talking about ice cream here. You get a bad report and you go to the grocery store on the way home and you say, I'm picking up a gallon of ice cream and I'm eating that all by myself. I'm just saying. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs into it and is safe. A rich man's wealth, now here we go, a rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. Now, who's writing this? Solomon is writing this. How much money did Solomon have? He's the richest man in the world. Solomon had wealth. Maybe Solomon said, I have experienced this myself. Maybe Solomon says, verse 8 is me. He says, I was the rich man, and in my time of out of control in my life, I ran into my tower of wealth. He says, I ran to what was comforting to me. And it wasn't toward God. So maybe that's what he trusted in. Maybe that was his tower. We can have a tower of anything. Anything. It does not have to be wealth. We can have a tower that we run to in times of stress. What do you run to in times of fear? What do you run to in times of boredom in your life? See, Solomon says that's what I ran to. When you run to something time after time after time, it will become a natural reaction to you. It will become second nature in your response. It will just become a habit, and a habit becomes addiction. So your running to whatever it is can become an addictive tendency in your life. So let me give you an illustration, okay? Let's say there's a guy at work. He's at work and he's having a bad week. His boss calls him into the office. His boss gives him a tongue lashing up one side and down the other. He walks out of the boss's office there, and the office assistant there is giving him a snarl, has said some kind of cross word to him about 3 times during the week, and he glazes over. I wonder what's up with that right there. I wonder why they're talking to me that way. So he's lost an account at work. He's lost, maybe some income. He's lost. He's just lost a few things. He's just on the bad side. He's had a bad week. So here it is Friday, and the whistle blows. He punches the clock, and he walks out of the office there. He gets into his car, and he gets home, and he sits down in his recliner, and he looks at his 50-inch TV, and he says, man, he says, I just need something to pick me up. So he sees maybe college football is on. He sees on college football right there that there's an advertisement, a commercial comes on for a 120-inch curved screen TV, and he says, that right there will make me happy. So what's he do? He wakes up Saturday morning, and he tells his wife, I'm going out to Best Buy. I'm going to get that new 120-inch curved screen TV that I wanted. And his wife looks over at him, and she says, no, you are not. We have not finished paying for that 50-inch that's hanging on the wall right now. So what's he do? He says, I'm going. He goes to Best Buy. He whips out the credit card. He puts another $7,000 because they had a Bose surround sound that went with the setup. So he said, I've got to have that too. So he gets this flat screen TV, 120-inch. He gets a Bose surround sound. He puts another $7,000 on his Best Buy credit card there. He goes home. He has that thing installed. He calls his buds up the afternoon. He says, y'all guys need to come over here. NFL is starting next week or Sunday. You need to come over here tomorrow, and we're going to watch all the games on my new 120-inch curved screen TV with my Bose surround sound. And he is just ecstatic. He's excited. His buds come over there. They got chicken wings. They got potato chips. They got Coca-Colas and everything else. And they're having a good time. So it's good. That's a good $7,000 spend, isn't it? Whatever. So he goes back to work Monday. Monday comes. Isn't that right? Monday comes. Don't say anything, Amy. Monday always comes. Sometimes 5. So Monday comes and he goes back to work. He's sitting down at his job, and maybe the boss gives him the runaround again. Maybe that same assistant gives him a sideways look again, and he's had another bad week. So he goes home after the next bad week, and what's he going to do? He just spent $7,000 on a new TV and sound system to go with that. He sits down in his chair once again. He says, I need something to make me happy once again. What's this guy going to run to now? What's going to be his high tower? One of his buds calls and says, hey, we're going to knock off from church Sunday, and we're going to take all these brand new Razors we have out, or UTVs, utilitarian vehicles we have out. He says, we're going to take one of those out, and we're going to go out trail riding on Sunday. He says, that will make me happy. So what's he do? He goes out and he buys a brand new $16,000 Razor. It's got all the nice graphics on it. It's got the nice sound system in it. It's got the radio in it. It's got the light bar on it. It's got the big wheels. It's got the shiny tires on it and everything. And he says, that will make me happy. So what's he do? You see a cycle? What's he running to every time where he feels that he is not happy? What is it that you run to try to escape and feel good about something to maybe lift you up? What are you running to in your life? Those are towers. Those are the towers that we run to, and we think are going to provide happiness and security. So, still in verse 11 here, a rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. So what's that last word? The guy who has the problem going and buying the TV and the $16,000 Razor, he's seen not a razor, no. I just now realized that. You're thinking about shaving. One of those fancy things you drive. You see, hey, you guys live out here in Marshall County and all of you see them barrel down the road all the time. So you shouldn't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. You can obviously see I don't have one. I only have a go-kart. But anyway, I have a 1996, is it? Four-wheeler. I've owned that thing. 80. That's almost older than me now. Come on now. It's about 30 years old. That was my granddad, 96. I don't have that either. All right. But what do we run to? we have this guy in his own imagination. That's where we were. His own imagination. See, the guy with the problem in our illustration, he thought the TV in his own imagination was going to bring him some kind of stress relief, some kind of comfort. Or then the next weekend he thought buying that, that big souped up fun vehicle to go trail riding was going to be his source of comfort. But where was it? It was all in his imagination. And that's what Solomon says. A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. So you're running something to your imagination that you think is going to bring you some kind of relief from your struggle. Verse 10 says, here's our answer for us. Any area that is out of control can be corrected when we do turn to God as our strong tower. The Lord is the strong tower. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs into it and is safe. You must learn to say no to the other stuff, the other temptations. But see, our generation does not like that. Last verse, Titus chapter 2. We're not coming back to Proverbs. So Titus chapter 2, verse 11 and 12. That's toward the end of the Bible. I don't hear any pages turning. You just need to keep going right. You'll get there. Titus chapter 2. Okay, while you're turning there, let me tell you, we have a problem saying no in society. Let me tell you what happened to a school in New York as they were dismissing for the last school year, 2017 school year. A school in New York sent home the report cards because we have a problem saying no. A school in New York sent home the report cards at the end of the year and said, if any of your kids or you parents have a problem with any grade on the report card, let us know and we will change it. Where was that when I was in school? I got a problem with a lot of my grades. They didn't offer that then. But I say that, but you believe it. You know it's believable. It is believable today that would happen. And as far as I know, it's true. Titus 2, verse 11 and 12. How can we manage to say no? For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men, instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires and to live sensibly. The first verse, 11, for the grace of God has appeared and it instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires and to live sensibly. The grace of God has enabled you to say no. That's what the verse says. You cannot do it on your own. But the grace of God in you, God's grace, can allow you to say no. In your own ability, it's not going to happen. But in the ability of God, it is attainable. It's achievable. What you run to reveals what you think is a strong tower. What you run to reveals what you love. Until you say yes to God, you cannot say no to the sin. Because this says it's the grace of God that enables you, instructs us, equips us to deny worldly desires and to live sensibly. So until you've experienced that grace in your life, the ability, you can't conquer it. See? You can't conquer in your own. So quit trying. Run to God. Let me tell you one last thing about walls. And this is it. Solomon says, run to walls, run to a tower for protection. Where was Jesus taken? Jesus was taken outside of the walls. Jesus was taken outside of the wall so sin could be heaped upon him. Jesus was crucified outside of the wall of protection. He was crucified outside of that wall of protection. Why? So that you could run inside the wall, inside the high tower for protection. Jesus went to the outside so you could go to the high tower, to the inside. I want to ask you to bow your head. Just go ahead and stand with me this morning with your head bowed. Maybe you have not said yes to God, so you don't know that grace. You do not know the opportunity afforded to you, given to you, to be able to say no to the desires of the flesh.